Back again, and welcome back to the next video within this series, which is going to be our activation system, as I've explained in the last summary video that I've done. So in this little video, we're going to be implementing a activation system that's going to go hand in hand with our registration system. So without further ado, we're going to actually jump straight into it, but there's a couple of steps that we actually need to do before we can get this to work. For starters, we're going to need some kind of a sandbox temporary email system that we can use to see the email that we're going to be sending, the activation email that we're going to be sending. I've been using a service called Mailtrap just to use their sandbox features to implement onto my project. So when I'm doing stuff like this, like registering, I can get that email, I can see the information there, I can do testing from there. So we're gonna implement Sandbox or Mailtrap. If you've not already got a temporary mail server that you're using to do your own testing, you could use that. But for anyone else who hasn't got a system or a service that they're using, you could head over to Mailtrap. I'm going to sort of like walk you through it a little bit. I've already got it set up. I think the process is pretty simple. You go to the website, you register for a new free Sandbox account. It's probably going to send you some activation email, which you go into your email to confirm. And I think that's it. I think that's the entire process. So I'm going to show you around in my dashboard in the Mailtrap website, on the Mailtrap website, so you get an idea of what information we're going to need for our website or for our project, so we can actually have a test email system set up. So I'm going to turn it over to my browser, and I'm going to go to Mailtrap. Mailtrap.io is the name of the website, and right here it says you could sign up for a free account. You click that button, you could either use your Google account, GitHub, or whatever you got. There's plenty of options right here, or you could do a straight sign up. Either way, whatever process you go with is going to register you on the website, and it's going to send you all login details, which you can then use to log in to access your dashboard. So if I log into this website using my information, just want to log in. This is what the basic dashboard looks like. So if you click on the demo inbox, you get a lot of information right here, like the address, username, password, and so on, so that you need to implement into our project, which I'm going to show you where you do that in a minute. But if you click on the show credentials, it gives you all the host, the port, username, password. I mean, I'm going to reset mine, so because I'm using this information right now. Not that it's going to make any difference because I'm working locally, but I can reset my information at any point. And all you need to do then, if you reset yours, just simply come back to this website, copy the username, password, and put it into where we're going to be implementing ours. So let's go back to the editor, and I'm going to show you where those information goes. So if I switch my screen again, and I'm going to go to our env or .env file. This is where the information needs to be, right? I've currently got my information set up, which you can see on the screen. Make sure, well, in your Magma Core starter that we're working in right now, you should already have this .env file with all of these information in. So it's a matter of going in and putting the username, password, the host, and the port number, which I'm using 2525, right? I think only you get multiple options. You get 25 or 465 or 587 or 2525. I've just used 2525 by default, is what I've been seeing other integrators using. They have got integration option, but our framework is not in this list, so we will just use the information that it provides us, and we simply going to be putting that into our .env file, which is what we got down here. So hopefully you take a little bit of time, you go through that, you put the information in this .env file, and just get cracking on with actually implementing our activation system. And now we've got a test server, we will be able to send email and test our system that it works. So our activation system, what exactly is the activation system? Essentially what it is, it's a very simple script, and the only thing that it does is when you register for a new account on this application, what's going to happen is we're going to be using event dispatching to actually send or listen for when that action is fired, and then we're going to send an email containing that current user information to the registered email address. That email is going to contain a token that we're going to hash and put it in our database, right? We're going to send that raw token wrapped in a URL link that's going to link back to our project, our website. It's going to link to the activate route, which we're going to be creating within our controller, and we're going to have the token attached to that route, which is what we're going to be using to actually find that user within the database. So we're going to be implementing all the method that we're going to be using to get the activation token and use it to find our user, get the user object, and change some of the columns in our database table to say that that user is now active, right? Because by default, as I was saying, each time a user is registered on the front end, the status will be pending, and until they activate their account, that status will then change once they successfully activate their account, right? So we're going to be going through all the steps, all the process of how we go about building and implementing this feature within our application. So let's go back to we're already on our editor. So let's start by creating our actual route for our activate system. So let me go to our config directory, and we need to find that routes.yaml file, because this is where we define all of our routes. So within this file, I'm going to define a new route, which is going to be an activate route. But we also need to take into account that the route is also going to contain a token, which is going to be that token that we're going to be sending to the user account. That very same token, we're then going to hash it and actually put it in our database when the user registers for a new account. So all we're going to do that is we're going to say activation /activate. So activation is the name of our controller, and activate is the name of the method, right? And we're going to give it a dynamic token, which is a token that can be that will be dynamic, because each token will be unique to each user, right? So we're going to be adding on a dynamic token. So we're going to say curly braces, and the token name that we're going to assign this value to is going to be the string token, because that is how we're then going to retrieve a token from the URL. And I will show you that in a minute as well. Once we get to that part, I will go back and forward to sort of like demonstrate what I'm saying. So I'm going to say token, and this is regular expression that we're going to be using to actually generate the dynamic token for us. So I'm going to say token colon, say square bracket \d, which is getting all digits, and it's going to be A-F and plus. So we're trying to match all them characters between A and F, right? So that is as much as we're going to be doing for our activation route. So that's the activation route. and we're going to assign it to a controller and a default action. So we're going to say controller is going to be activation, spell that properly, and action is going to be activate, just like so. Save that. So now that we've created our activate route, we're now going to go ahead and we're going to implement that controller and that method. So let me close that for a minute. Close this as well. Into our app directory controller, and we're going to be putting this within our main controller directory. So I'm going to say new file, new PHP file. So it's called activation, which is the name of our controller, and it's going to be activation controller, just like so. And we're going to just quickly fill this out with declare strict type, give it a namespace, and we're in our app namespace and our controller directory. Let's say class the activation controller, and we also want to always extend into that base controller. So extend base controller, and you can see that it automatically imports it for us from our main core directory. Now, as I said in previous videos when we started our controller, we're going to be using the constructor method. So we're going to be putting in our constructor. So it's going to be public function construct, and you can see that it automatically fills it out for us as well, because all of our constructor is going to contain this array, which is the route parameters, which we're going to also pass back to the parent base controller, right? And from this route params array, we can access stuff like the token that we've just defined within our routes.yaml file. We can get stuff like ID, we can get stuff like the name of the controller, the namespace, and the actual method, right? So by doing this, we're passing in the parameters for this particular controller back down to our base controller. Hope that makes sense. So within this constructor method as well, we can also declare our definitions, and our definitions, or the stuff that I've said in the past, is how we define local dependency for our controller, right? So we've got a global dependency which we can access through any controller, and local dependency is only accessible to the actual controller that it's defined in. So say this add definition, and this takes a single array as the argument, and one of the stuff that we're going to need right now is going to be the activation action single action class, right? And I will walk you through that as we go along, because there's no logic within these controller. All the logic is being handled by these single action classes. So I'm going to get my activate action, that's the name of the property. I'm going to assign that to activate action class, which is going to be within our core configuration. So it's going to be activate action class, and you can see that it automatically also imports that for us as well, right? So let's put a right. So now that we've done that, we're going to be implementing that single method that we've got within this particular class. And it's going to be a protected method, and it's going to be function, and it's going to be activate action. And remember, any method, any route method that we create in our controller has to have that action suffix. That is how the framework knows that this is a route, just like so. Right, so what we want to do now, actually, we want to start using that single action class. So the single action class that we've defined within our add definition, that contains methods that is chainable, right? So in previous iteration, I was doing something completely different. I had all the logic within these controller classes, and I sort of like thought, if I create single action classes, I can literally reuse these logic in any of my controller. There's going to be single action classes which is going to be specific to a particular controller, which might not get used anywhere else. But the whole point that I was trying to make is I'll remove all the logic from the controller and I've add that, and I've basically put it somewhere else. So I'm going to access that activation action single action class. I'm going to start chaining on some methods onto it and explain to you what these methods are. So it's going to be this activate action, just like so. And the first method we're going to be chaining on is the execute method, and this is the method that does all the logic. So it's execute, just like so. This method contains several arguments. So I'm going to, the best if I open this file, we're going to go through the arguments and we're going to go through what the actual method is doing. So if I bring up that file, it's going to be in, let's just try and do it like that. So what I've just done is I've old controller and the link, the actual text becomes a link, and I clicked it and it just opens up that file for me. So activate action is implementing domain action logic interface, which contains a lot of methods like the render, end, and with method, which also forms part of that chain. So this is our execute method, and the first argument it's asking for is the object, which is a controller, which is the object. So let's go and fill that in. So back to our, let's collapse this for a minute so we can get a bit more space. Back to our execute method. The first argument is the controller, and the controller is the current controller that we're actually working in, the current object. And the way we're going to get that is we're going to say this. That's it. That represents in PHP the current object, right? And that's how we're going to pass it as the first argument. So the second argument is going to be entity object, but we're not working with form fields. No, we're not posting data, so we're not really working with entity. So we're going to set that to null. So the third argument is event dispatcher. So now we are going to be using event dispatcher to do our stuff like redirecting. In the future, we might actually do other stuff on that as well. But for this video, we're only going to be redirecting, which is quite basic. So we're going to be saying activation action event. Now this is a class that we've not yet created, so we're going to be creating this class right now. So back up in our application, our app directory, we're going to find our event directory. We're going to create a new class there, new PHP class, and it's going to be activation action event. And this is a convention in terms of how we go about naming these classes. So it's going to be the name of the controller, which is activation. It's going to be action, always going to be action after the controller name, then ends with event, right? That's the convention. So we're going to say activation action event, and because these are all the same, I'm just going to copy the content of one and just paste it in. So let's copy that, close it, then just paste it in here. Let's change the name. It's going to be activation action event. So now we also need to change this constant, because this is how each event is uniquely identified, right? So we've got app, which is the namespace, and we've got event, which is the directory that we're currently in, which is what you can see right here, app backslash event. Now I've simply taken out the backslash and I've used dot, right? So it's app.event.login action event, or in our case it's going to be activation action event, and this is how we uniquely identify each event. So I can I can search for this particular listener or this particular event name, and whenever time this fires, I can actually execute some code whenever time this particular event is fired, anywhere within the framework. So that's pretty much all that we're going to be implementing within this particular class. So let's close that and let's import it into our controller. So I'm going to right click, and I can't import it that way. Oh yeah, I can. So import class, and you can see that it's imported at the very top for us. So it's app event activation action event. Right. I'm going to say colon class. So that's a third argument within our execute method. Let's have a look and see what the fourth argument is. The fourth argument is going to be object schema. Now we're going to set this to null purely because we're working with the users table, and the users table or the user model already defined the schema. Now the column that we're going to be manipulating with our activation code is going to be the activation token column within our user model table. Now because we've already defined that, we're going to be setting the fourth argument within our activation execute method to null because we're working with the user model that already exists, right? And I'm going to show you exactly how that is linked in once we get to creating our repository file for our activation class. Now the fifth argument is going to be the method. So we need the name of the method that this execute method is operating in. That way when we come to chain on stuff like our render method, we know what template, what HTML template we want to display. So this is how this works, by using this PHP magic constant method. Let's get that back, just like so. By doing that, internally the framework knows what template to display, right? So let's look at the other arguments. So the sixth argument is going to be rules, and 7 is going to be additional context, and 8 is going to be optional. Now we're not going to be using any of these arguments within this particular execute method, and we don't have to declare them because they've already been assigned a empty value. So we got an empty array, and the last argument is set to null, and because they've got a default value already assigned, we don't have to specify them within our method. Right, so now that we've completed the execute method, the render method we've just added in. Now the render method takes an optional argument, which is going to be a different template. So convention, if you go with convention, what this is doing is it's going to automatically know what template, what HTML template we should be using based on the structure of the method. So we got the activate action method. Now is going to be looking for a activate.html file, right? Now if we want to go against convention, we can specify a different HTML template file within this render method, and that will override or overrule the default convention. But we're going to leave it as it is because we're following the convention, and we're going to let the framework get that template for us, so long as the template obviously exists. Now the third method within this chain is going to be the with method, and this method takes one argument, which is an array, associate array, which we can pass additional data to our template, additional context to our template if we so want, right? It's optional, we don't have to if we don't have any data to pass to our template, but if we do, we can pass them in through this method right here, and we do that by simply saying stuff like name. That could be a variable defined somewhere, or it could just be an hard-coded value, whatever. And in our template, we will simply reference the name as a variable within the double curly braces, like so. I will say name, just like so, and that will display the value for us, which is going to be Ricardo, just like so, right? Let's just get rid of that because we don't really want it. And the last method within this particular chain is going to be end. Now we have to specify the end method because that is how the framework also knows, well, that's the end of the chain. Let's display the content to the screen, right? That is the basic logic behind our controller, and this is how we're going to be doing it going forward. If we come across a situation where we have not yet got a single action class to cover that logic, we will simply just build that into the core, or we can even build it into our app directory and use that if it's something specific to what you're doing, right? So the framework does allow for you to use your own single action class so long as you build it within your application directory. Now that is pretty much all we're going to be doing in this particular controller. That's all. That's controller finish right there. So something else that we need to create is our event subscriber class, right, which matches the activation action event. So we're going to be creating a new file. We're going to say new PHP file to be activation, and it's going to be action subscriber, just like what I've explained to you just now about the convention with the naming. Subscriber class follows that same pattern, so it's activation followed by action followed by the subscriber, right, because we're now within the event subscriber directory. So I'm going to say okay, I'm going to copy the content of one of these files and make the changes and paste it into here. Let's change the name, so it's going to be activation action subscriber, and we also want to change the event that is being passed in to match our activation. So I'm just going to say activation action event, right, and I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it in where I've got reference to login. So I'm going to paste it in right there. So you can see what this is doing right there. So it says activation action event : name. So we're getting the name of this event, and we're simply executing these method on that particular event. So we've got one method which is called flash login event, which we've defined down here, and this is where our the redirect and the messaging is being done. And this is going to be the same in any action in any event subscriber class. We're going to be doing these by default because whatever we need to redirect and display a message, this is where we're going to be doing it from. Not this particular class, but any subscriber class that is linked to a controller class where we need to redirect and display a message. We're going to be doing this. So let's save that. We also need to register this particular event subscriber within our YAML file. So let's do that before we forget to do it. So how we do that is we're going to go to, let's widen this out a bit. Let's close that up. Let's go to config. We're going to go to events, just like so. So this is where we register each of our event subscriber. If we don't do that, it will not work, right? And you can see we've already got some registered from our previous videos that we've done, stuff like on the security controller, on our registration controller. So I'm simply going to copy this and then make the changes. So copy, and it has to match the indentation of what's going on. If it's not indented properly, then we're going to be having some errors. So I'm going to change this first string right here to activation because that is the name of the controller. So it's activation.subscriber, and the class that we want to point to is that activation action subscriber class that we've just created. So let's just replace part of this string to activation. And we also need to change, let's copy this and paste it right here, which is going to be our controller, and we want to point to the activate action method. So it's activate action method. So that's the method. When that method execute, we're going to be returning a message. So let's try and figure out what message we actually want to return. So what we can say right here for the message, we can say something simple as you are now activated. So or you can say your account is now active. Let's keep it something generic like that, right? So now that we've registered that event, let's close this file. We're finished working within this file at the minute. Let's we need to change this as well, so let's copy that. We're going to get an error to change that because that needs to reflect our activation event class. Let's paste that. Let's save this file. Let's close it, and let's. All right, we're going to leave this activate action single action class open because we need to. I'm going to explain to you exactly what the process is, and then we're going to go ahead and create the additional methods that we're going to need. Right. So by looking at this single action class, you'll notice that you'll always see these three properties which I'm assigning to some of the arguments directly. That way I can use these properties within my domain trait, which is a trait, PHP trait, which contains all the additional methods that forms that trait, right? So I've got direct access to at least 3 of these arguments within that particular trait, right? So you can see the first thing that we're doing within this actual activation class is getting that route token, right? So I'm going to demonstrate some stuff to you at the minute. I'm going to demonstrate some stuff so we got a better understanding of what I'm referring to, right? So I'm going to load up this activation route and let's see what we're getting. So let's go back to our controller. Let's just simply just blank this out for now, and let's go to our browser. Switch our screen. Right, so I'm going to try and hit up that activation route and see what we get. So I'm going to say / activate. Route activate does not match. So let's say let's change this for a minute. Let's go back to our routes.yaml file. Let's comment that out. Let's copy it. And let's just change that to activate without the token. So activate just like so. And let's reload our page. And you can see now something's happened. That error has gone. Let's just change my screen again. That error that we had before has gone because now I've changed around just to play around a little bit. So let's do something like echo something out so we know that our route is working. So this is, I'm currently writing something in my editor so you can see it on the screen. So let's reload. This is working, right? Which is what I've just written within the activate action method. Right, so I just want to test that a little bit just to make sure that that works, which it does. And let's just bring this back, save it. Let's go back to our routes.yaml. Let's just bring this back. We're going to make up something just to give ourselves something to work with. So if I switch my screen again, if I reload again, I'm going to get that error again. So let's try do something. Let's point to the exact route that we've defined within our YAML file, which is going to be activation, activate, and we're going to make up a token, right? So it's going to be activation activate /a. Let's just add some digits, add a F, some more digit, and let's see if that's going to match our route. Let's enter. So we're getting an error say call to a member function find by activation token on null. Right, so that's good. We know that's working. Let's bring it back to the editor and let's go back to our home controller. But before we do that, let's do something. Let's var dump something. Let's var dump this route token. And let's kill that script right there. Right? So let's go back to our browser again. Let's reload. And you can see what we're getting. We're getting that string, that token, right? That is what we need to get our user object from our database. I will simply add to call a method. Let's go back to my editor. By calling this route token, this is a method that I've created within the base controller, and that is accessible through our route params. Our route params that we've got right here. Now I can also demonstrate that as well, right? So if I can do something like, let's create a property for this. Let's just say this route params equal. We don't need to do that actually, because we already got that route param that we can get that is already defined within our base controller. So we can say something like route params. Let's just reload our page. Let's try and see what we get from that. So reload, and you can see what we're getting is an array of our controller, which is activation, the action, which is activate, and the current token within the URL, the URI, which is this string right here. So we've got the controller activation, we've got the method activate, which is action, and the token, which is this string right here. And you can see token is what we've given it in that that routes.yaml file. So if I bring that back up again, if I get that YAML file, token, that is a string that we've given it called token, right? So if I change it to something else, it will reflect right here as well. So that's the token, and that is the string that we've posted within the URL. Now, when we come to do the activation, we're going to dynamically generate this string automatically. We're going to generate it using our token generator script that we've already got in our utility folder. We're going to use it to generate a token for us, which we're going to send along. We're going to send that to the user email address, but we're also going to hash that same token, put it in our database, right? So if I go back to we're already on our editor. So if I go back to the controller and just try and get the token itself, so we're going to say var dump this route params. We just want to get the token, just like so. Go back to the browser, we're going to refresh, and you can see we're now only just getting the token, right? So this is what this route token method, this is pretty much what it's doing. It's just returning params token within our base controller, and I've just simply wrapped it in these little classes, which makes it much easier to sort of like get the different parts of this route params variable that we've passed down to our parent construct, right? So if I go back to my editor, let's get rid of this var dump, and let's just close our route file, because now we're finished with this route file. Let's close it, and let's go back to our browser and see that error again. So this is the error that we're getting. Let's reduce my screen so you can see it properly. So it's saying we've got an error on our activate action class. So if we go and fire that up in my browser, let's go back to the activate action. It's saying we've got an error right here, find activation token, find by activation token. No, we haven't got that method. We've not yet created that method, which is why it's giving us an error. So we're going to be doing all of these little method, and I'm going to demonstrate how we're going to get that object back. So let's close this, go into our app directory. So if you see me looking around, I've got a lot of screens in front of me at the minute, and I'm trying to navigate around so I can switch my screen and make sure that you are seeing what I'm seeing, right? So that's why I'm looking around a bit. So if I go to back into my app directory and go to I'm going to create a new directory actually called repository, because I'm going to create a activation repository class, which is where I'm going to define these methods. So I'm going to say new directory repository, and the first class I'm going to create is our activation repository class. So it's going to be new PHP file activation repository, just like so. Okay, I'm just going to do the same thing that I've been doing before, declare and give it a namespace. So we're in our app directory, our app namespace, but we're now within our repository directory, just like so. Say class, and I'm going to say activation repository. Now I know that I've got a interface that I've created which contains 4 methods. I can actually show you that as well. Let's just go to our core directory, magma core source, and that's going to be in our auth directory and contracts. So we've got user activation interface. Now these are the 4 methods that we have to implement within that repository once we implement that interface. So I'm going to walk you through these as I'm building them. So let's go back to our repository class, and the first thing we're going to actually do is we're going to extend our user model. So I'm going to say extend user model, which is a core file within our user management system in our core directory, right? I believe I've already been through some of the, but I will touch back onto it. And we want to implement that interface. It's user activation interface, and you can see that it's imported these 2 files for us, right? Now that red squiggly line on the bottom simply indicating that we've got methods that we've not implemented yet. So I can go back to our activation interface. Let me copy these methods, and I'm just going to paste them in just like so. I'm going to give them a body, just like so. Right, so these are the 4 methods which we must implement, and I'm going to implement the first one, and then we're going to go back to our browser. We're going to var dump and see. We're going to see if we can get a object back, which we might not get actually. So we'll need to register a user first and set up our emailing system so we can get that token, so we can click onto it and see the object. But we're going to create this one method nevertheless.